All right, last talk of the day, 5 p.m. Everyone is trying to get fucked up, and I'm the one stopping you from getting there, huh? I promise I'll make this fun and sweet. All right, today we'll be talking about building apps visually with Draftbit. Now, this is probably one of the only conferences I could speak at where most of you will be able to pronounce my last name, right? In Polish, it's Piekarczyk, but in the US and literally everywhere else in the world, it's a little harder, right? So in English, we say pie, car, chick. And it's easy to remember because it's pies, cars, and chicks, right? Pies, cars, chicks. All right. A little bit about me. I'm a Y Combinator alum. Just before this, I was home for 2 nights, but the other 2 weeks before all this traveling, I was in San Francisco raising money for Draftbit. I'm Expo's first user. Believe it or not, it's true. I love plants. Whenever I travel, I stop in at a garden or whatever and take plant pics, check out my Instagram. Did it. Yes, thank you. I love ReasonML, and you will too in about 1.5 years when you hate TypeScript. Don't at me. I'm the co-founder of Draftbit, and the most excited part about this for me is that my family is from Wrocław. My mom grew up here. This is a picture of her, my 2 uncles, my grandma, and some lady that I don't know. But anyway, it's so nice being back here. I met up with my aunts, uncles, and cousins, and it was nice being able to speak Polish to them. So this is great on many levels for me. Anyway, we're entering a new era of app development, whether we like it or not. And what do I mean by that? We're pushing the boundaries and creating more complex experiences every single day. The same way that you'll see a new trick, something radical happen on the X Games every couple of years, we're doing the same thing through open source, through libraries, and through different companies. And the most exciting part is that we're making the current experiences so much easier. Things that we take for granted today, we used to do by hand 5, 10, 20 years ago. Don't believe me? Do you remember life before React Native? I never looked into building a mobile app before that, right? Objective-C, Java, Android Studio, those are really hard things to work with. And now here we are, starting new communities, new businesses, new opportunities in just under 5 years. It's radical. And the beautiful part about this is time shows consistent patterns in software development. You've probably heard the phrase, history repeats itself. And it does, and it happens in mysterious ways sometimes. And the more radical examples do happen over a lifetime. In the 60s and 70s, we had punch cards and assembly, right? Imagine punching out a bunch of holes, right, waiting for the computer to print out the result, and realizing that you misspelled hello world and had to do it all over again, right? I console.log 100 times a day in JavaScript, right? Maybe even more. Assembly was an imperative approach to moving bits around memory, right? The 90s and 2000s came along, and we've entered a new era of computing, right? We had the web. It brought us HTML, CSS, and PHP. But most importantly, it brought us a brand new interface to developing, right? We developed languages with real human words, surrounded by brackets and curlies that helped us express to the computer exactly what we wanted to do. That was our interface, right? And with those languages, we developed IDEs with syntax highlighting, with code hints, right? It made life so much easier. And then with those things came frameworks like CodeIgniter, Django, Laravel. Ruby on Rails changed the way that we develop, possibly forever. And the most exciting part of all, for the first time in this world, non-technical people were able to express themselves, right? Copywriters, bloggers, marketers, designers, photographers were able to build their own websites without writing a single line of code. Today, we're building super complex apps and have a lot of anxiety because JavaScript fatigue is real, right? The analysis paralysis, the choice paradox are things that we struggle with on a daily basis. how do we go back to the 90s, right? Life before cell phones, when we were all super happy and we didn't count the number of Twitter followers we had or the number of likes we had on Instagram, right? How do we do that? Well, in history, like I mentioned, there's course correction that takes place. Things will be repeated and we'll sort of come back to a state of happiness. Like many of you, when I first started tinkering around with code, I use a tool called Dreamweaver, right? Back before it was Macromedia, bought by Adobe for like $1 billion, right? Before I even knew what HTML and CSS was. And this is what it looked like, right? You pushed buttons, you pulled levers. Things were good, right? It just worked. And then how did you deploy a site? You didn't open up your terminal. You opened up your HostGator or Bluehost or whatever, and that had a cPanel running. You'd click WordPress or Apache PHP server, and then you'd use one of these, an FTP server, right? You take your folder, drag it into public HTML, and it would go live. The only thing you had to worry about is going on the equivalent of like Hacker News back then, and your server being overloaded because like 16 people went to the site at once, right? Fast forward a few years, and we are starting to course correct, right? Webflow builds beautiful marketing websites, right, in a matter of weeks instead of months. Shopify lets you start up an e-com store in a matter of days. Airtable does a great job of linking programmers to non-programmers by giving you a spreadsheet on steroids and a Node API to help you automate mundane tasks. Heroku helped us with the deployment process by just git pushing and handling all scaling, handling all deployments, going to a UI and just adding things like my Postgres database or logging or whatever. And finally, we're entering this new era of computing with serverless, where I just write a function and it automatically scales with zero server setup. Now, going back to the React Native stuff, Expo came along and made it really easy to build and deploy mobile apps. I don't know about you, but I struggled with trying to get React Native background geolocation and Google Maps working together, right? That took like days sometimes. Let's not even talk about upgrading React Native. Expo did that in one line. And then we had these big tools that we used to have to install, like Android Studio, Xcode, right? And now try getting this stuff running on Windows. We've made a lot of progress with this, but you know how it is. It's still really, really tricky. One of my favorite quotes is from Ryan Hoover from Product Hunt. As creating things on the internet becomes more accessible, more people will become makers. It's no longer limited to the less than 1% of engineers that can code, resulting in an explosion of ideas from all kinds of people. Now, you probably are sitting there wondering, Peter, what does that have to do with us, a room full of developers? That's where Draftbit comes in. Draftbit helps teams build mobile apps visually. And what does that mean for developers? You get to focus on the cool stuff, right? You don't have to deal with the mundane tasks that sometimes we are tasked to do when other non-technical people on your team can take care of those. And we sort of discovered this when we were working on Orchard. Orchard was a way to manage your personal and professional network through an app. And we built this with all the coolest technology, Expo, GraphQL, React Navigation, about 3 years ago now. And this was ultimately what got us into Y Combinator. And the thing I learned through that experience is that iteration is everything. Every 2 days, we had to come up with new results, new experiments, new layouts, new experiences, just to keep moving, right? We went through a lot of iterations, a lot of different layouts, changing colors, themes, designs. We were forced to work hard and get those things done. And then sometimes a designer on the team would have the audacity to be like, hey, that border radius is 5 pixels instead of 6. Do you mind updating all the different cases across the whole app? And you'd be like, are you fucking out of your mind? Right? We're all in these situations. No matter how great our design systems are sometimes, or how great engineering practices are, in the 11th hour, a lot of these things get thrown out the window to meet client expectations, to meet customer deadlines, right? We've all been there before. Draftbit sort of makes that process a lot easier, right? You no longer have to deal with downloading a bunch of software. Eventually you will, but at the beginning, when you're trying stuff out, all you do is scan a QR code. You add a bunch of components, and then you export that code. And this is what the UI looks like. We do some really cool things here. We're running a web version using React Native Web and a bunch of different modules so you can see what you're working on immediately. In this case, I've got the simulator running, but in your case, you might have your phone connected. You might have 2 or 3 phones connected, right? And as you drag and drop, you just see your changes happen live. Now, I love putting up this example, right? Here we have enable location screen in an onboarding process, right? You've got some image at the top, some title, a subtitle, and then 2 buttons that we have to add, skip and enable, right? So we put those buttons on the screen, right? We justify them, put them at the bottom, we style the buttons a certain way, and we're on our merry way, right? And even the greatest developer can take hours coming up with a screen this easy. And as you can see, we did this in a matter of seconds with Draftbit. And you can just take that source code and export it out and do whatever you want with it. And maybe sometimes your app has multiple themes. So you go inside and change the colors, right? Do whatever you want. And I'll talk more about that in a second here. So now, folks always come up to me and say, Peter, I've heard this story before, right? The apps that you make are simple. They're not going to look good. The source code that you're generating probably isn't great, right? But on the contrary, these are the types of apps that people are making with Draftbit. They're beautiful, they're complex, they've got great experiences. And when it comes to the source code, we can't help but make sure that we do the best we can, right? We've even been able to figure out the style sheet, right? A lot of these tools before used to inline the styles, and we managed to abstract them out and give you the style sheet. And we do this through a variety of different methods. So Draftbit is run by components, right? And we've got a variety of them. We've got Jigsaw, which is our themed component system tightly integrated with Draftbit, which I'll talk about in a second here. And it comes with a wide variety of components that you can use for any sort of app. We've got our React Native primitives that you know and love. Image, view, text, scroll view, keyboard avoiding view, section list, flat list, whatever you're used to is all there. We've also added helper components like container and divider, which is just a dividing line, because sometimes it's just fun doing that. And most exciting of all, in the near future, you'll be able to import any library that you want, including CallStack's amazing React Native paper. Cool. Now, how does this all work? So I mentioned Jigsaw earlier. And Jigsaw is our version of a component library that we put together to set you up for success. It's based on a light version of material design, right? We wanted to give users the balance of being able to customize their app as much as possible, but also becoming productive very quickly. So you can upload custom fonts, you can add custom colors, spacing, shadows and border radiuses, set different typographies for headlines, buttons, captions, whatever you'd like. It's all baked in if you choose to use it. And the interesting part is, with the click of a button, if you do utilize Jigsaw, you can theme your app instantly, whether it's for a client, whether it's for a customer, university, hospital, whatever. You can style the app however you like immediately. And what that looks like inside of Draftbit is just a set of colors with a picker, and it makes life easy. Sometimes your designer might say, hey, I want to have 64 grays. Are you cool with that? And you can be like, no, fuck off, because we're not going to do that, right? We've been there before. When it comes to setting elevations and surfaces, you can do all that the same. And you've got a nice little preview too. So you've got, more or less know what's going on. And the same goes with typography as well, right? Set the different line height, the spacing, the font size, whatever you need to do to be successful and move forward, and now you can just reuse that. You've got a design system that's got guardrails preventing you from making the silly mistakes that you may make in the 11th hour. The most exciting part about releasing a product is having folks use it, because you learn about what people are doing and how they're doing it, right? The thing that we realized really quickly were folks were building the same experiences over and over, right, across all of our users. Things like sign in, register, my account, my profile. And those are great things to build from scratch every time, but we want to set you up for success. We want you to get your app out there quickly, efficiently. So what we've done is we created a bunch of screen templates, right? If you need to use a sign-in screen, just use it and focus on the bread and butter of your app, right? Focus on the money-making parts that will take you to the next level, because a sign-in screen won't really get you there, you know? And all you have to do is look at it, give it a shot on your phone, and then just add it to any of your apps. Now, I may be a little biased because I am working on Draftbit, but I've also contributed to React navigation. And let me tell you, being able to set up your navigation through a UI is so much more fun. We support everything that React Navigation does under the hood, except we do it visually. So being able to set the tab icons, the colors, your navigation stacks, onboarding routes, we've all been there where we have to change the way our navigation works. And sometimes that can be a little stressful. With Draftbit, you can just reorder the screens and generate a brand new file that's your app navigator that you can update in your app, right? It makes the process easy. It lets you focus on building the most important parts of your app and less about trying to figure out, how do I set up the navigation stack? How do I do log in, log out, right? It's all there right in front of you. All the hints that you need are just a drop down away. A lot of your users were also wondering, can I create custom React components inside Draftbit? And while it doesn't necessarily work the exact same way that you do it through code, we're getting closer and closer. So what you do, you'll create your layout as you usually do, right? And then you've got this layer tree. And what you do is double-click on one of those layers. You rename it to whatever you want. You can change it to view, to header, to footer, to main, whatever you like to call it. And we've got this nice context menu, too, that you can hover over. You can delete the whole component. You can duplicate it. And then you can save it, too. And then when you save it, it sort of works like creating a new component or like symbolizing a file in Sketch. And then you can use it across apps, across screens, whatever you'd like. Now, another thing that kept coming up is, how do I do data? You can export all the source code you want from Draftbit. And a lot of people were doing this when they got to this step. So we said, rest assured, we'll come up with something, right? And we did. You just enter a URL, put in the method that you want. You can even preview your requests, make sure that the request works, see the structure of your data ahead of time, and then map those fields to real components. And it looks pretty cool, too. Now, the most exciting feature of all time, the most long-awaited feature of Draftbit is bring your own GraphQL, right? If there's anything that people talk to me about when they've used Draftbit, it's, boy, would it be nice if I could hook up my GraphQL server to Draftbit. And I say, yes, 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 it's coming soon. And now it actually is. If you've never used GraphQL before, every GraphQL server starts out this GraphQL Playground, right? It consumes your URL automatically. It shows you your schema, shows you some basic automated generated documentation. But the powerful part about this is being able to test all of your queries, right? Before you hook it all up into your app, you can open up the GraphQL Playground, write out the queries individually, and then test it and see the result. So that when you are using it in your app, you've already isolated any sort of issues that could have taken place and setting yourself up for success. Thanks to Sean and the OneGraph team, we've been able to take that to the next level inside Draftbit. We've been able to integrate the GraphQL Explorer. And what the GraphQL Explorer does is lets you enter any GraphQL endpoint, right? Any URL. And what we do is we take the GraphQL Playground to the next level by generating a checkbox for every type of node that you can query in your database. And all you have to do is click the things that you want. We automatically build that query for you. You select the nodes that should match the actual components, and then you just click the ones that you want to connect. And then you party, because you've just generated a full GraphQL server and client in your app without writing a single line of code. And the most exciting part is you can connect any GraphQL endpoint, including OneGraph, Amplify, Hasura, all amazing tools that you should be checking out. That's reason to party a little bit, outside of this being the last talk and I'm almost finished. Now, another exciting thing that we've been hearing from a lot of people is our config panel, right? our config panel is a little lackluster right now. It's got a long way to go. So we've been working on improving that, right? We want to bring the whole process up front and easier for you to use, including incorporating keyboard shortcuts, bringing accessibility up and making it a first-class citizen and having a whole tab. So you can think about that thing right away rather than having it be an afterthought and going back. We're going to support faster screen building too. Sometimes you don't even know how to lay things out. So put all the components that you need on a screen, and you'll see a nice little pop-up that gives you a variety of different presets that'll automatically update the rules and components. What we want to do is we want to aid the developer to be able to move quickly and get you to the goals that you want faster. Now, sometimes folks say, wow, this is fucking sick. I want to build an app, but I don't have any ideas. And I say that's a personal problem, but I digress. What we've started doing in the meantime is creating app examples. And the first one that we've launched that you can start using today is called Draftbit, which, if you could guess, is our Airbnb clone that we've built in Draftbit. Batteries included with navigation already set up. And what you do is you can preview it, you can export all the source code and do whatever you want with it. You can copy it to your workspace and start tweaking it, changing the colors, adding screens, removing screens, whatever you want, and you're done. All right, everybody, you have been the best audience ever. Also, shameless plug, I'm almost at 3,000 followers. If you like this, and only if you like this talk, please follow me on Twitter, because I'm like 20 followers away. Thank you so much, CallStack and everybody, all the sponsors, for having me here today. It's been so nice being here in Poland, in Wrocław, being able to speak some Polish. Thank you very much, and let's fucking party.